So welcome to everyone on this week's shir. We're going to be learning Perek Tet and Sefer Melachim Aleph. We have been following the building of the Beit HaMikdash, and at the end of the previous Perek, if you remember, Shlomo HaMelech praised to God that in a number of different scenarios, 5 or 6, that God should pay attention, hear, and listen to the prayers of the Jewish people via the Beit HaMikdash. The Beit HaMikdash is ultimately a portal for our prayers to be able to go up to Shemayim. And so now, Perek Tet begins the response. Vayehi kechalot Shlomo livnot et Beit Hashem ve'et Beit HaMelech ve'et kol cheshek Shlomo asher chafetz la'asa. It was after Shlomo had finished everything. Now, how many years is everything? So if you think about it, we had the numbers already. We know that the Beit HaMikdash was begun based on Perek Vav, Pasuk Aleph, in the 4th year of Shlomo HaMelech's reign. We know it took 7 years to build the Beit HaMikdash, and we know that based on, which was Perek Vav, Pasuk Lamed Chet, and we know based on Perek Zayin, Pasuk Aleph, that the Beit HaMelech, the palace, took 13 years. And so this is most likely the 24th year of Shlomo HaMelech's reign. And he built not only the Beit HaMikdash and not only the palace, but he also built the Cheshek Shlomo. The Malbim says, and others agree with him, the Cheshek Shlomo, Cheshek means the desire. What is the Cheshek Shlomo? Those are the buildings that he didn't need, but that he wanted. And so all of the other kinds of things that were built, all of his massive building projects were completed at that point. And at that time, Vayera Hashem el Shlomo Shenit. God appears to Shlomo HaMelech for a second time. Now, the interesting thing is, where is the first time? So the first time we know is Perek Gimel Pasuk Hey, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes to Shlomo and says, what do you want? And that's the famous story of Shlomo requesting wisdom and getting everything as a result of that. The only problem is, back in Perek Vav, at the time of the building of the Beit HaMikdash, we also have the statement, Vayehi Devar Hashem el Shlomo. So if I take the first time back in when Shlomo was asked about the wisdom, Perek Gimel, and I take Perek Vav, and now I have Perek Tet, if my math is correct, it's not the second time, it's the third time. So the question is, how do you resolve those issues? So the Abarbanel says that the second time during the building of the Beit HaMikdash, it wasn't a direct nevuah, but rather there was a Navi who came to Shlomo and reported the Devar Hashem. Of course, the problem with that statement is it doesn't give the name of a Navi. It doesn't say that along comes Natan Navi and says, here is the Devar Hashem. So we're not really sure what it is. The Malbim suggests that actually Shlomo also received that prophecy while building the Beit HaMikdash. But that prophecy was of a lower status of Nevuah. That the direct status of Nevuah was really only the second time. In the middle, there was a prophetic vision, and that prophetic vision is not considered the same terminology as here. Here it's, again, Vayera. Therefore, also, back in Givon, it says, Ra'ah Gamken. It's also that same shorish, he saw. Whereas in the middle, during the building of the Beit HaMikdash, is Vayehi Devar Hashem el Shlomo. God's word came to Shlomo in a different format, a different fashion. So as a result, the Malbim doesn't have to deal with the question of where is the Navi who gave that second issue. And the Malbim is able to say they all came to Shlomo, but this is still the second appearance of it all. That here along comes God, Asher Nira Elav Givon, just like he had appeared to him back in that Perek Gimel episode of when God appeared in Givon. But the question is, why does it have to say Kasher Nira Elav Givon? Couldn't the pasuk just have said, Vayera Hashem el Shlomo Shenit, Vayomer Hashem Elav? What do I need this middle piece? And the answer is that Shlomo at this point has already done something that was a bit controversial in some people's eyes. What did he do? Well, he built the Beit HaMikdash, that's not a problem. He built his palace, that's not a problem. He built the Chayfet Shlomo, that's not a problem. And he married the daughter of Paro. uh-oh. So when he marries the daughter of Paro, you might want to say, something's going on here and it's not good. And the reality is what the Navi is saying, no. He still has that same communication with God as he had back then when he was a new king and he was starting off and before anything else happened. So you want to have a complaint against him, that's fine. But God didn't have a complaint against him. Says Pasuk Gimel, Vayomer Hashem Elav. So Hashem says to him, Shamati et tfilatcha v'tchinatcha asher hitchananta lefanai. I have heard your prayers and your supplications which you have brought before me, which you have prayed before me. Hikdashti et habayit hazeh asher banita l'sum shemi sham ad olam. And I have sanctified this house. We talked about it last week, how in Divrei Yamim, we talk about that when Shlomo is done with his first level of tefillot, that the fire comes down from the heavens and begins to burn the korbanot. V'hayu enai v'libi sham kol hayamim. And my eyes and my heart will be there all of these days. Now, what is God saying? God is actually responding to Shlomo HaMelech's tefillah. Shlomo had a couple of levels of tefillah back in Perek Chet. One was personal. One was about his dynasty, his offspring. And the other was about the status of the Beit HaMikdash itself, that it should be the place, the portal for things. And in fact, Shlomo HaMelech said in Perek Chet, Pasuk Chavtet, V'tiyena Einei Hashem. Your eyes, God, should be here. And as a result, what God is saying is, Shlomo, you asked for it, and here it is. I'm confirming that this will be as you prayed. The Targum Yonatan says a little bit different, that the Hi Shchinati Sharya Be Im Ru'utai, with my desire mit abda tman kol yomai, as long as you're doing what I want you to do all of these years. So it is a conditional statement according to the Targum Yonatan. And in fact, what we have from this, that the Rambam actually brings a halacha. And the halacha is also transported in a way into our shuls as well. That when a person walked into the Beit HaMikdash, they had to walk into the Beit HaMikdash with an awareness that God was watching. And what is his proof text? Because the pasuk says the Rambam, and this is in Hilchot Beit HaBchira, he says the Rambam that God says, I'm going to be watching this all the times. Notice in many shuls, what you'll find, okay, is over the Aron Kodesh some kind of statement of Dal Lifnei Mi Ata Omed, that we have to have an awareness of God's presence. It's not that we're saying that God isn't everywhere, but we've asked for these places, the Beit HaMikdash in the classic, and by extension, the Mikdash Ma'at that we call a shul, we've asked for God to be more present there, that this be our portal nowadays, and so therefore we have to have that awareness as well. V'atam, im telech lefanai kasher halach David avicha betom levav v'yosher lasot kechol asher tziviticha. And you, if you're going to walk before me like your father David, remember these references back to David all along are very important because it's talking about the fact that David was forgiven and David was a paradigm of relationship with God. So if you walk before me like David had walked before me, B'tom levav, with a perfect heart, uve yosher, and also with a straightforwardness. Yosher is something where a person is unified in action and in thought. That it's not, what we would say in English, a person is not two-faced. A person is consistent throughout life. That's yosher. You have to have a pure heart, meaning a perfect heart, that you have the right intentions, and you have to be consistent in those intentions. And you, in other words, right now, we're talking about you and your family. You want to have this relationship with me. That's what you have to do. You have to keep my Torah. You have to be consistent in the way you keep it. It has to have the right intention. And then your dynasty will be eternal. Just like we had all along with David. Again, David keeps on being brought into this because this is David's Beit HaMikdash that was built by his son Shlomo. Im shov tashuvun atem uvenechem me'acharai velo tishmeru mitzvotai v'chukotai. But then, if you and your offspring, okay, if you go ahead and you turn away from God, okay, in that kind of case, Asher natati lifnechem, with the Torah that I placed before you, v'halachtem v'avadatem Elohim achirim v'shtachavittem lehem, and start worshiping other gods, v'hichrati et Yisrael me'al pnei ha'adama asher natati lehem. I will remove the Jewish people. I will cut off the Jewish people from their land, which I've given to them. And the house which I have now sanctified for my name, ashalach me'al panai, I will cast away from before me. And the Jewish people will ultimately be the source of lessons to everyone else. Everyone will be talking about the Jews. Look at what they had and look at what they lost. Now, the interesting problem that we have here, just for a moment, and this is something that's addressed by the Radak, is we started out talking about Shlomo wanting to have his dynasty forever. The only problem is, what's the punishment? The punishment is exile and destruction, not of the dynasty, but of the Jewish people. And so there's a result. What the Radak says is, he says the phrase, Im shov teshuvun atem uvnechem me'acharai, is not just talking about the members of Malchut Beit David, not just of Shlomo HaMelech and David HaMelech's offspring, but it's talking about the Jewish people. If the Jewish people turn away from God, then the Jewish people will be destroyed. If Shlomo's people turn away, then Shlomo will be punished. V'habayit hazeh yiyeh elyon, and this house will be supreme. Now, the problem with this phrase is the verb form. What do you mean, will be supreme? If you think about it for a minute, it should have been was supreme, because we just talked about the Bayit being destroyed. So what would it be? So the Targum Yonatan again takes it very simply. He says, Dahava Eli, that was supreme. And he takes that approach, and in fact, that is Rashi. Because Rashi also says that this is a shortened kind of phrase, a mikra katzar, and he says, look at divrei hayomim, the parallel psukim, and there it says, asher haya elyon, which was supreme. However, the Barbanel says, no, it's a different piece. The different piece is, we need to understand that there is a distinction between the nature of the book of Divrei Hayamim and the nature of the book of Melachim. And we forget it sometimes because we're reading stories in both places and parallel stories in both. The way they're different is, and this is obvious, but we don't think about it automatically, Melachim is part of Nevi'im. Divrei Hayamim is part of Ketuvim. What's the difference in nature between those two sections of Tanakh? Ketuvim were given Beruach HaKodesh. But Divrei Hayamim is a historical account with a purpose. Melachim has an element of Nevuah. It was written by Yirmiyahu Navi, and it includes Nevuah. And so therefore, what the Abarbanel says is, this is talking about the fact that this house, which God just said would be destroyed in certain circumstances, will be rebuilt afterwards. It's not eternal destruction. It is a destruction as a punishment, and when the Jewish people once again deserve it, they'll get it back. Yehiyeh will once again be Elyon. The Meshech Chochmah is the one who talks about the difference between Malachim and Divrei Hayomim. Kol over alav yisom v'sarak v'amru al me'asa Hashem kacha la'aretz hazot v'labayit hazeh. Whoever passes about them will be in shock. And v'sarak literally will whistle. Just like people say, the Mitzvot says that the sarak is the sound you make when you put your lips together and you put them up. That's called srika. He'll whistle. What are they going to, like, oh my God, look what once was here. And in fact, if you read writings of different people who had gone through the land of Israel. One of the more classic ones is Mark Twain, okay, from the 19th century. You listen to the way he talked about his visit, and everyone just talks about the destruction and the desolation of this place that was described as the land flowing from milk and honey. You understand exactly what the Navi is saying here. V'amru al asher azvu et Hashem Elokehem. And the reason they're going to say is they're going to say because they left their God. Yirmiyahu Hanavi talks about this with Nebuzaradan, who was the chief of staff of the Nebuchadnezzar. Hashem Elokecha diber et hara'ah hazot. God said that all of this destruction was going to happen. Asher hotzi et avotam me'eretz Mitzrayim. The God of power, who had saved you, who had wanted to give this all to you, took this away from you because you left God. Vayachaziku be'elohim achirim, and you took power, you took a stronghold with other gods. Vayishtachavu lehem v'ya'avdum, and you bow down to them and you serve them. Al ken hevi Hashem aleim et kol hara'ah hazot. And that's why all of these terrible things. At this point, this is the end of the classic dedication of the Beit HaMikdash, Shlomo HaMelech's prayer, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's response. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu's response is very simply, yes, but. I accept everything you say, but there is a condition that this acceptance will continue forever. We're now in Pasuk Yud, and now in Pasuk Yud, we're going to have a series of other things that Shlomo HaMelech accomplished during his reign. And the first is Vayhi Miktzeh Esrim Shana. It was.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So is there any place that we see HaKadosh Baruch Hu ever answering us just in the positive? There's always a conditional piece to it. And is there anywhere where we just say, hey, it's like when you're talking to the graduates, hey, graduates, you have so much to live for and so much to do. And if you screw up, you're going to end up in jail. You know, like, really? Can't you we just built this gorgeous Beis HaMikdash. Can't we just
By the way, Chumash, you have a lot of instances of that all of the time. You know, the promises to Avram, the promises to Yitzchak, the promises to Yaakov. There's a lot of very positive situations like that. Okay, but here, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I hear what you're saying, but remember, this is Yirmiyahu Hanavi who's also writing this. And Yirmiyahu is living at this time of destruction and where the Jews have made the mistakes. And Yirmiyahu, and as a result, we're talking about the realities of this wasn't unexpected. On one hand, I would actually suggest the but sometimes is more powerful than just the hooray and rah-rah. Because the but also says that there are boundaries. You know, if you provide opportunity without responsibility, you're leading someone down a bad path.
You can say that in the positive, though.
You can say it in the positive, and I hear. And so tell me how HaKadosh Baruch Hu should have said it, and I will definitely convey it directly to the powers that be. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
It seems to me, and I wasn't here last week, but it seems to me that what this is focusing on is a dramatic change in how the Jewish people were literally coming together to daven to Hashem. And prior to the building of the Beis HaMikdash, its establishment, its opening, its Chanukas Habayis, so to speak, the Jewish people were allowed to bring their own individual prayers on the bamos. That's where they davened at home in their own homes. And now they had this major opportunity to do something super grand, and became a double-edged sword, because now they had this glory that was going to be so public. They would be coming together as a nation. It was a national thing, even open to other nations, this glorious, gorgeous building, if you want to call it that, where everybody's prayers would be clearly answered. So it's a tremendous shift in the national consciousness. And so giving Shashis, here you are coming together, it behooves the nation to understand it's not just opportunity to come together as a nation, but this is now exposing you as a nation. And therefore, it's a double, almost like a double-edged sword. If you keep to it, then it's yours. Then it can be something super grand. If you don't keep to it, just because you had this opportunity doesn't mean you can't fail on a grand scale.
Yeah, I hear and I don't disagree in the message, but I also think we find these kind of messages. For instance, if you just think a couple of weeks ago of the Imbechu Kotai, of the Tochacha, we had the same kind of concept within the Tochacha. We start with the positive and then we move with the other side of it. So I don't know if it's it makes all the sense in the world to do this again now because of this massive shift. And going back to Shoshi's point, even with the Bechukota, if you remember, there's a famous statement of Chazal that when it comes to the brachot, God gives the brachot the positive from Aleph ad Taf. Okay, it's all inclusive, and the problem is when you start looking, it's 22 brachot they talk about, and when you look at it, it doesn't count until you see that in Bechukota it starts out that the positive with an Aleph and ends with Komamiyut with a Taf. And so it's structured in such a way. So I think even Chazal were looking to make sure that we keep the brachot in proportion, that they should be greater, the good should be greater than the bad in many ways. So I think there are ways of looking at it both ways. But it's true that this is an appropriate time for it. The rah-rah, the rah-rah is really good, but we're walking into real life. And we see these real life decisions that are being made now, even in our own time, going back to that earlier topic of how much we're going to venture out and how much we're going to open up and how much risk is reasonable and how much we want to do certain things and our pureness of heart. And are we really always having to judge those kinds of things? Are we doing it because we really strive to do it, or is there some other motivator for us, and where the right risks are associated?
Thank you.
To move on and to pair Pasuk Yud. Vayehi Mitzeh Esrim Shana. Okay, it is now after the 7 years. So the 7 years Asher Bana Shlomo Shnei Batim, where he built the two buildings, the two structures, at Beit Hashem and Beit HaMelech. Because remember, 7 years and 13 years. Chiram Melech Tzor Nisad Shlomo Ba'atzei Arazim Uva'atzei Vroshim, and Chiram gave us both the cedar and the cypress, and he gave us this wood. Uvezahav lechol chefzo. He was providing it for whatever was needed. He took care of it. It was something we knew about all along. As Yitena Hamelech Shlomo lechiram esrim ir be'eretz haGalil. Then Shlomo goes and he gave Hiram 20 cities in the north. Now, Shlomo HaMelech giving 20 cities in the north is very problematic. Why? Because how do you give away land in the land of Israel? How could he go ahead and do so? So there are a lot of different possibilities of how it is possible that he did it. And the simplest, as we're going to see, is going to be the question that he didn't give 20 cities, but rather he gave the 20 cities as a means of repayment, not the city themselves, but the produce of the 20 cities. And as a result, he's not violating this principle, the halachic principle of lo techanem, we're not allowed to give away. Now, all of this makes sense, but it is a little complicated. Okay, by the way, that's the Abarbanel's approach. The Radak, for example, takes the approach that Shlomo received from Hiram, based on Divrei Hayamim, 20 cities, and he's giving him back in return 20. And so as a result, he gave from this and he got from that, and it came out even. Rav Goren, actually, in a fascinating article he wrote in Hat Sofem in 1985, on Tet Tammuz, in 1985, he says, actually, what happened is when he gave back that land, he was undoing that kedusha that had been in place from the Olei Mitzrayim, from those who had come up and settled the land in the time of Israel, in the time of the post-Egypt after the Exodus, and it actually had to change status. But again, if we take the Abarbanel's approach, it solves a lot of problems, and we'll see that in just a moment. Vayetze Hiram mitzor lirot et ha'arim asher natan lo Shlomo. So Hiram took a little tour. He went down from Tyre, and he's going down south, and he wants to see what kind of cities did I get. Velo yashru be'enav. And he wasn't happy with it. In fact, Targum Yonatan says, lo kashrin be'enav. Kashrin really means fit, like the word kosher. These weren't what he needed. Now, the reality is, why didn't he need? And I'm going to follow along with the Abarbanel's approach. They didn't fit for him for the simple reason that, hey, you want me to get my payment for all of the gold and the wood and everything else I've given you out of these cities? These cities aren't going to be able to provide that kind of yield. Vayomer, and he says specifically, Ma ha'arim ha'elu, what kind of cities did you give me? Asher natata li achi, my brother. Now notice that word achi is significant because if you took this as an international battle, the person wouldn't necessarily say achi. So that Chazal say is a good sign. Vayikra lehem eretz kavul ad hayom hazeh. And they were called, this area of these 20 cities were called Eretz Kavul. How does, if anyone has an art school, I didn't look at how art school translates Kavul. Shackled, I don't know how they translate it. If anyone wants to pipe in, if you have an art school, if you don't pipe in. But Josephus actually says Kavul, that actually this is the name of the city. And interestingly, in Phoenician, Kavul means unwanted. And so it might be that they called these the unwanted city. Rashi says Kavul actually comes from the word Kavul, which is chains, that these cities had like quicksand in them. Okay, it was impossible to walk in them. They were so useless of land, and so Hiram is not happy with this. The Ralbag says, okay, that this is just a place you can't grow anything, which the Radak says Kavul means sagur, it's closed, just like to be shackled or locked off. And as a result, all of these cities that he gave him weren't good enough. So it says, Vayishlach Hiram lamelech mea v'esrim kikar kesef. Strangely, after not being happy, he goes ahead and he gives them a massive amount of gold. So why? What's going on here? Why is that the response? If you take the Abarbanel, and the Abarbanel again says that he's not happy with these cities, he wants to be paid a different way, why immediately would you go ahead and send more gold along the way? Well, first of all, the Malbim says he's sending gold and not wood, just to get that out of the way, because they don't need the wood anymore. The buildings are built. Right now, it's just a question of gold that's needed. The Kliyakar says the issue here is he's sending to Shlomo the gold just as a sign that he's not breaking off relations, that he disagreed with what he got. He'll get it some other way, but he's going to continue providing what needs to be provided. Okay, and it's a similar kind of statement from the Ibn Kaspi, who says specifically he's sending the most precious of his resources, the gold. The Abarbanel says, no, that's not really it. Because the Abarbanel says it's a strange connection. You don't get what you need to pay for what you received, and right away, Hiram goes ahead and sends all this other stuff along the side. So the Abarbanel says, actually what's going on here, that Hiram did not send these as part of his supply chain. He actually was the transport agent, because Hiram, as we'll see later, had a navy, and he had his boats, and he had his ships, and the gold was coming from Ophir. Now, Ophir is on the coast of Africa, and they needed to be shipped in to Eretz Yisrael. And says the Abarbanel that all that was happening here is that Hiram brought the gold that Shlomo HaMelech had already bought. And it was another step of relationship, which leads into something which we'll find at the end of the parsha itself. So Hiram and Shlomo still have this relationship among themselves. But how is Shlomo going to go ahead and take care of all of these financial needs? And so the next pasuk really begins to talk about it. Okay, and this was V'zeh davar hamas asher halesh hamelech Shlomo livnot et beit Hashem ve'beito v'et hamilo. This is the taxation or the tax that Shlomo HaMelech levied in order to build the Beit HaMikdash and his palace and the area of the Milo. Now, the Milo, what it is, we'll get it. Rashi basically says that the Milo is an area between walls. Now, Kathleen Kenyon found that famous Milo in Ir David. Anyone who's toured Ir David, you remember near the beginning of Ir David, there's an open area and you see like these stepped walls that are going up. That's the area that's called the Milo. That's the way they filled in the space between the walls and the actual mountain itself. Milo coming limlot to fill it in. Others, though, suggest the Milo may be like an open courtyard. In fact, the Medrash suggests that these were large open courtyards. But this was the area that was primarily between the old city of David, the Ir David, and now the new city where the Beit HaMikdash was in the upper city there. So those three areas, how did he fund it? He had a tax. Ve'et Chomat Yerushalayim, and also the new walls of Yerushalayim that had to be built. So if you look on one of the maps that I gave you, let me just get to the right map, and I'll share it with you in a moment. Okay, if you look at the second map, the map that is the map of Yerushalayim itself, and it should be on the screen now. Okay, on this map, what you'll see is this is the area here of the Har HaBayit. Okay, and when you have that area of the Har HaBayit, you know, where it says Har HaMoriah, and then extending downward from it. Let me just see if I can do this real easily. Extending downward from that, wrong thing, I'm sorry. Extending down is the Ir David itself, is the area that's called Ir David, the city of David. We're familiar with that city of David concept. Okay, that's happening right, Ir David is right here. Okay, now the Milo, one theory is it's this area here between the Har HaBayit, which I'm now filling in with a solid, it's there, and here is the Har HaBayit. So there was a set of walls that circled the top part, there was a set of walls of the bottom part, and the area in between would be identified as the Milo itself. Another theory says the Milo is right in here, where we see that area that Kenyon had excavated. But whatever it is, these are the descriptions of the areas, and how did he fund it? Again, it says he funded it through a tax. Ve'et Chatzor, ve'et Megiddo, ve'et Gazer, and Gezer. And the three major cities as well that were fortified cities of Shlomo HaMelech, and we're familiar with those three cities. Again, we're talking about Gezer, and we're talking about Chatzor, and we're talking about Megiddo. All of them we have found now excavations of all of those areas. Chatzor, again, is towards the north, and Megiddo also. They're all in the northern area, which were major outposts of Shlomo HaMelech. Paro Melech Mitzrayim, and in the parenthetical statement right now, Paro Melech Mitzrayim alav yilkod et Gezer. Paro had actually conquered himself. He had conquered Gezer, and when he had conquered Gezer, vayisrafa ba'esh, and he had destroyed it. He burned it entirely down. At that point, Yoshev Ba'ir Harak, he killed all of its inhabitants. Vayitna shiluchim levito eshet Shlomo, and he gave it as a dowry to his daughter when she married Shlomo. So as a result of that, Shlomo now has that city, and we understand why it has to be rebuilt.
Rabbi Matanki.
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't Gezer in Eretz Yisrael?
Yes.
So can you explain Paro in Israel?
Paro went ahead, if you recall, that Paro had the strongest of armies, and Paro went in, and Gezer was one of the cities that had not been captured by Yehoshua, and he captured it, and he conquered it. His armies were the most massive, and they were coming along. If you remember, even at the time of Yetziat Mitzrayim, we had the issue of the Egyptians having Lo nicham Elokim, what is it? Lalecha derech Eretz Plishtim. That along the what we would call the Gaza Strip, or along the coast, Egypt had outposts there as well, and their armies were based there as well. And so this was something that he had the position to be able to take care of.
So, but this is Paro Melech Mitzrayim by Yetziat Mitzrayim, or this is Paro Melech?
No, this is the Paro, the father of the daughter who married Shlomo HaMelech, that he actually sent his own people in to conquer that city.
So this was contemporaneous with Shlomo's rule.
Shlomo's rule, or slightly before it. He took care of it. Vayiven Shlomo et Gezer Beit Choron Tachton. And remember, if there's a Beit Choron Tachton, there's a Beit Choron Elyon as well. All of these things he built. Ve'et Ba'alat, ve'et Tadmor Bamidbar Ba'aretz. And he also built Ba'alat and Tadmor. Now, Tadmor and Ba'alat already are areas which are most likely well beyond what we normally think of Eretz Yisrael. Tadmor, where it is being identified nowadays, if you look on the screen now, Tadmor is all the way here, is all the way up here. And this was Shlomo HaMelech's empire. He had all of these areas. There was, of course, the Plishtim's outpost here, which he couldn't get into yet, but he had all the rest of this area, and it was something that was given to him with a sense of security throughout. Remember, we talk about that he didn't have really major battles, even though we'll see in a moment that he had a standing army. V'et kol arei hamiskenot asher hayu l'Shlomo. Now, arei miskenot we're very familiar with. Okay, we have arei miskenot back in the time.
Rabbi, I'm sorry, can I just add that other thing? Was that like a thing that Shlomo did wrong, that he got the territories up north without really conquering the Pelishtim and getting them out? Would that, in other words, if the Pelishtim are still in what's really considered Eretz Yisrael, and he got territory that would be outside Eretz Yisrael?
Well, so again, the definition of what Eretz Yisrael is defined by the areas which were conquered. Ultimately, at one point, we're promised everything, but until we conquer and settle, they aren't ours. So there is going to be an issue, which we'll see in just a moment, which we'll address. There's a famous machloket that exists actually between Rashi and the Ramban on this matter. But there were places he couldn't conquer. So the Eretz Plishtim they couldn't get. And because they couldn't get it, the Plishtim were constantly against them. And according to Rashi, as you're suggesting, Alita, it's going to be a problem. God is not happy with the Jews, that they're doing all sorts of other things and not finishing off the land. According to the Ramban, it may not be as big of an issue.
Okay.
And when it comes to the storehouse cities, Arei Miskenot Leparot, Pitom Bet Ramses, we know this from Chumash. However, interestingly, again, the Barbanel says Miskenot in this case is not Miskenot of storehouse cities, but rather it's referring to like the word misken. In Hebrew, if you want to talk about a nebuchal, okay, a nebuchal is a misken. And a misken, what this means then, according to the Abarbanel, is that these were cities that were impoverished cities. They were, and I'm trying to think of what we would call them nowadays, because there's an English word for them. It's like Kiryat Gat. Where you go ahead, you have slums, you try to build it up, you try to take care of it. And what Shlomo did in his reign is he took these cities, according to the Abarbanel, which were all in miserable economic shape, and he built them up. Asher hayu l'Shlomo v'et arei harechev et arei haparashim, and he also created cities which housed all of his horses and chariots, and all of these additional buildings that he had to build, and all of his governance areas. And who was this tax against? The tax was the Amori, the Chiti, the Prizi, the Yechivi, Hayavusi, Asher Lo Mibnei Yisrael Hema. They were the ones who were taxed. And not only were they the ones who were taxed, B'neim Asher Notru Achareim Ba'aretz. They were the people who remained in the lands, the offspring of those who came at the time of Yoshua. Lo Yachlu B'nei Yisrael Lachrimem. And the Jews were unable to get rid of them. Vaya'alem Shlomo Lamas Oved Ad Hayom Hazeh. And Shlomo made them the ones who were responsible for the building. They had a labor tax placed over them. Now, the problem, as I was just mentioning a moment ago, there is a machloket between Rashi and the Ramban. The Ramban says that actually when the 7 nations, Chiti, Amori, Prizi, Yevusi, Girik, Yeshiv, etc., when the 7 nations were approached by Yehoshua, the Ramban says that one of the options they had was to start keeping the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, and they could stay in the land of Israel. Rashi disagrees, and Rashi says, no, they all either are killed or they leave. They don't have a choice. According to Rashi, as a result, Shlomo is going to be held accountable for giving them a labor tax, but not expelling them from the land. According to the Ramban, these offspring were keeping the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach. They were still a ger toshav. They were still not allowed to be, they weren't full citizens. They had rights, but they also had to pay a tax, which was a very common tax. The idea of a labor tax in the ancient world was so very common. And in fact, that goes back to actually the Ramban, back in Sefer Shmot and Perek Aleph, Pasuk Yud, Havanit Chakmelo Pen Yerbev, etc., where Paro begins to enslave the Jews. Why is it when he begins to make them work that they don't catch on? And because it was just obvious that in the ancient world, you wanted to stay in a certain country, you had to produce a certain amount. You had to work, you had to do something, you had to pay for it. And so he put these people in to working for them. Now, all of this, however, comes with an interesting piece. But Shlomo never enslaved the Jews. Now, the challenge we have from this is back in the building of the Beit HaMikdash, if you remember back in Perek Hey, Shlomo HaMelech had 30,000 people who he sent to bring the cedars of Lebanon to the Beit HaMikdash. And they worked on rotation, if you recall. Wouldn't you say that that's a masoved? It was mandatory. It wasn't something that he just said, hey, anybody who wants to volunteer. It wasn't a volunteer army. It was a necessity. So the Abarbanel says the difference is those people who worked, it was a tax, but it wasn't a mas oved. A mas oved has with it an element of avdut, of a responsibility of servitude associated with it. And as a result, for the non-Jews, there was a mas oved. There was an obligatory tax that they had to do, they had to work. When it came to the Jewish people, there were taxes, but it wasn't the same level. But the interesting thing is he says, the Jews, ki hem anshe ha-milchama, ve'avadav v'sarav v'shalishav v'sarei v'chbo farashav. Those people, because the Jews were all in the army. They were the people who had to serve in the army. Now, the Abarbanel says, army, what's going on with an army? We say that it's been all quiet and peaceful in the time of Shlomo, so why does he need an army? Says the Abarbanel, it's very simple. He didn't have any wars, but you still always have a standing army. You still have the Swiss Guard, at least. Okay. However, the Radak says no, that there were minor battles that Shlomo HaMelech had to fight. He really did need an army at the same sense. Eile sarei hanitzavim asher al hamelacha Shlomo, and now these are the people who oversaw these actions, this work of Shlomo. 55 ma'ot. There were 550 harodim ba'am who were direct taskmasters over the people. Interestingly, in Divrei HaYamim, the number is a little bit different. There's a 300 person difference. There it has 250 people. And the interesting question is, how do you have the difference? And it may be talking about two different groups, two different types of work that were responsible. So we don't have a real problem with it, but there's 550 haosim b'melacha who are responsible for the ones who are actually doing the work. Ach bat paro al tamir David al beita asher banala az banat milo. But also at the very same time, at that point, bat paro moved out of the Ir David, and she moved over to the area of the Milo. The Milo being an extension. There is a famous machloket among Chazal, was this positive or not? And actually, the position starts from the fact, why would she move? It seems to be she moved to the new palace. That makes sense. We talked about, along with Shlomo HaMelech's palace, there was a separate palace for Bat Paro, which could just mean that this is, hey, building is done, everything is done, she's moving into her permanent home. However, there is another position which says very simply that Shlomo HaMelech did not want to keep her there in the Ir David, because the Ir David at one point had housed the Aron, And because it had housed the Aron, it had a level of Kedusha, and he didn't want Bat Paro to be in that place which had a certain level of Kedusha. But what is the Milo involved here? Well, the Milo is he built up the Milo, and again, did he use this Milo inappropriately as a courtyard, or did he build up the area of the Milo for Bat Paro, taking important places where the Jews could congregate? If we say the Milo is a massive courtyard, he used that courtyard for Bat Paro. So there's a number of different approaches. Some say that her palace was adjacent to the Milo. Some say that the palace was built on the Milo. Some say the Milo was never meant as a courtyard. All of these are within the theories and the possibilities, but we do know she moved at that point, which seems to indicate the change. Shlomo 3 times a year, he himself did the Aliyah L'Regel, even though he was already in Yerushalayim. He did this next step of going to the Beit HaMikdash. He provided and he fulfilled everything that had to be, okay, with the Beit Hashem. He built everything, he paid for everything, he made sure that all of the service was taken care of. And it wasn't just those 3 times a year, it was throughout, but the 3 times a year is significant to us because of the Shalosh Regalim. V'oni asa HaMelech Shlomo b'etzion gever asher et elot al Sfat Yam Suf. And Shlomo HaMelech also built boats. Now, Oni is, again, a source of a machloket which exists. Does it mean he built a boat? Or is it talking about a fleet of boats? But he built, in other words, he established a navy. And where was this navy based? It was based by Elot. Elot, we know where it is. That's Eilat. Okay, he had that along the way, by Eretz Edom, all the way in the Eretz of the Edom, all the way down south. Vayishlach Hiram ba'oni et avadav anshe oniot. And Hiram goes ahead and he sends his own navy, his sailors, who knew what they were doing, Yodei Hayam, im Avdei Shlomo, to train, to work alongside Avdei Shlomo. So you see this alliance between Hiram and Shlomo HaMelech is extraordinary. Vayikchu misham zahav 420 kikar vayaviu al HaMelech Shlomo. And Avdei Shlomo went ahead. I'm sorry, Vayavo Ophira, and they went to Ophir, Vayikchu misham zahav. They went to this coastal city of Ophir. They brought from there gold, and they brought, the amount was 420 kikar, and they brought it to Melech Shlomo. So together, Hiram is working with Shlomo. At this point, we're going to finish totally this building in the way Shlomo HaMelech established the kingdom and how he financed everything. Next week, we're going to pick up a little bit more on the Chochmat Shlomo. We're going to talk about Malkat Shva, etc. And what we just need to know is right now, Shlomo HaMelech is still doing good. It's a plateau. Okay, he built the Beit HaMikdash, he built the palaces, he's taking care of everything. We haven't seen any opposition whatsoever. But we do see this very, very close alliance with Hiram, with Hiram Melech Tzor, Hiram of Tyre, which is something that we always wonder about as well. And so I'll see everyone, please God, next week, same time, same place. And I thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, by the way, before you forget, every night this week, the CRC is hosting a series of She'arim. And what they're doing, they started last night, and it is on the CRC website. I encourage all of you, if you have a chance, to participate. There's Zoom meetings. You go to crcweb.org, Shavuos, and if you just give me one more second, then I'll share one more screen with you. And so you'll see last night we had She'arim from Rabbi Rees, Rabbi Perek, Rabbi Bressler, Rabbi Lazovsky. Tonight, Rabbi Posner, somebody else, Rabbi Engel, and Rabbi Tzimprero. And each night there will be 2 hours of She'arim, a half-hour She'arim from the rabbis of the CRC. It's an exciting project. In addition to it, there is one more piece of the project, that what we're trying to do is create a community siyum, where people learn either Tanakh or Mishnah. And then at the end of all of that, next Sunday, actually that's maybe a problem for it. Next Sunday, right after our She'ur, is going to be a concert with Eitan Katz, celebrating a siyum in the community. I encourage everyone to sign up. It's really very easy. You fill out this form. You say what you want to learn. If you want to learn Tanakh, it asks you what in Tanakh you want to learn. You say you want to learn Chumash. It tells you, okay, what's available. Here's available. You can pick whatever prakim you want, and you can choose. And it's that simple. So I encourage everyone to take a few minutes to sign up, to learn a little bit extra. I don't know, maybe Perek Yud and Sefer Melachim Aleph might still be available. Have a great day.